Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for the presentation on Online Backup Basics 101. Today we will be reviewing the different types of data, different backup technologies, as well as an in-depth look at the cloud backup and related business trends. Our presenter today is John McGuire, the Director of Sales and Marketing here at VaultLogix. John has been with VaultLogix for 8 years and brings over 15 years of backup and storage industry experience with him. Without further ado, I give you John.
Thanks, Melanie, and thanks everyone for joining us today. So for starters, I wanted to talk about from a high level, seeing that it's Backup 101, to talk about the different types of data. There are 3 different areas that we'd like to talk about today. One is desktops, the second is laptops, and the one is server. So from a high level, a desktop, of course, is a personal computer, but there's not a lot of critical data that's kept on desktops. Typically, most companies are actually requiring people to make sure they save documents and any information they have on the servers that they're accessing. Number 2, there are laptops. Again, these are personal computers, but of course they're made for the mobile user, people that are in and out of the office, traveling, consultants, what may be. Because of this, there is a lot more critical information because they're not in the office to access and save information to any kind of service they may have. And as we take to the next level to talk about servers, these are the most critical. This is where all the applications run, file servers, information that runs the business. Of course, there's a lot more storage and processing power, and in most cases, desktops and laptops are actually accessing servers. So to jump into the different types of backup technologies is the start of understanding the evolution of backup and where it's coming and where it's going. For starters, we'll start at the beginning, right, back to tape. It's the first, the original, and still widely used in the industry. But some of the key points that I want to touch base on here is understanding tape technology. Is that the first thing, there's really no format standard. There's DLT, Super DLT, there's LTO, AIT, and even within those, there's different releases and versions from them. So there's not a lot of backwards compatibility when you're talking about keeping data for long periods of time. On top of that, reliability issues in regards to tapes. There's a lot of moving parts, and these typically can fail over time. And then the last point here is talking about the performance. And the one thing we always talk about with tape is it's a linear solution, meaning it starts at one end and continues on. Whereas because of that, it can be slow to write. But number 2, making sure that you fit into certain backup windows, you might have to do an incremental backup or a differential backup, which can be time-consuming in regards to restores because you need to retrieve the first full backup and then add in incrementals or the differential in that sequence to restore the data from there. So as technology evolved, of course, and disk became a lot cheaper, people started writing backups to disk. Number 1, it was faster, but on top of that, you were able to protect the disk with certain RAID variables. RAID is a redundant array of independent disks for anyone who doesn't know that. But what you're able to do is protect that, so that unlike tape where you have one copy in one instance, at least with RAID you're able to protect the disks and the information that's there. Of course, it's a lot faster. You don't have to worry about a media standard because disk is just disk. The biggest problem, though, is that it was you couldn't get it off-site. So there still was a lagging gap there. So what came next, right, is the adoption of, okay, well, let's incorporate disk so that my backups are faster, ability to restore faster as well, but then back that up to tape, so I have that mobile piece, that piece of tape that I can get off-site to handle, which is great. So combining the two to help solve all the problems. The only issue with this is you're now having to manage a lot more, and it's a lot more money you're having to spend up front. So as the technology continued to grow, people started getting into replication, understanding, okay, well, I need to make sure that I've got my data off-site, but I need to make sure it's available so that the employees or the people that don't have added information today at the corporate office, they do have it somewhere else so the business can continue to grow. which is a great ideal. But again, you're talking about a lot more cost up front. You're talking about additional hardware, software to manage, as well as any kind of internet connectivity, power, or anything else that's at that secondary location. And again, which is great, utilizing different tools and technologies to be able to access that data so the business can continue to run. However, the biggest problem you have, though, is that it is more of an availability, and as replication is that you're replicating information. You can't recover from that information. You can only have access to that information. So the final evolution, or evolution as we have it today, I'm sure there's something else coming down the line, is really talking about cloud backup. This is adding the speed of disk backup on site while getting it off site to the cloud for recovery purposes. The keys to this is really outsourcing your backup. And it mentions there's no hardware or software required to purchase, so there's less to manage. And again, it's outsourcing your backup to somebody else and to more of an expert. So moving on from there is trying to understand, why are people moving to the cloud? And what are some of the key factors that are driving this? And the one thing we've seen here, as Melanie mentioned, I've been here for over 8 years, is some of the key pieces is really that data is distributed in so many different locations now within companies. Yeah, you've got corporate offices, but you have laptops, teleworkers, remote office workers, remote offices in general. So the cloud has been a great way to adopt to be able to handle that, to push out to there to handle some of those needs. And on top of that, the internet, the cost of internet and bandwidth has come down dramatically. That actually makes it more cost affordable to actually be able to utilize the internet to send data to a cloud provider. And then even the adoption of these cloud backup companies that are coming in doing more application support, the ability to do specific applications running on SQL databases, Oracle databases, could be running your Great Plains accounting, could be running your CRM or your Exchange email. But on top of that, any kind of virtual environments, be it VMware or Hyper-V, and having that support for that is really driven down to this business of why people are moving to the cloud. And then lastly, of course, the real key piece of this is really truly the need to just get your data off-site, where some people aren't doing currently today. So looking here is a really interesting slide, is more the adoption of people that are using or planning to use it. I think it's kind of an interesting look into where people are going. If this survey had come out probably even a few years ago, I bet you'd be a lot less. But I thought it was interesting to see that that a third of people are actually currently using it today, but almost half, or a little less than half, are either using it today or plan to be doing it within the next year. But I think the key to focus on here is maybe the people that aren't doing it, and maybe people that are on this call today that aren't doing it. And here are some of the reasons why. Why are they not going to cloud for backup? Well, the number one reason that people talk about is the lack of control around security issues. And in the next slide, we'll get into some of the details that can debunk these myths. But a close second to me was it's too expensive. And again, looking at the RTOs or even ROIs on the ability to implement this, I think it does make a lot of sense. And then lastly, talking about just not being fast enough, or really the ability that it doesn't meet regulatory compliances, could be done through financial or healthcare, but on top of that, could be self-imposed internally as a company is the reason why they're not. So let's talk about some of these key features and how cloud backup does meet some of these concerns of people why they haven't implemented. Well, number one concern, talking about availability, people having access to their data. Well, the difference with cloud backup is that you always have access to your data. Depending on who you're looking at, you have access to the client or the software that's sitting on your network, or in most cases, a lot of companies like VaultLogix, we deal with the ability to actually access your data through the web. So constant 24/7 access through that, as well as 24/7 access, as well as to technicians and customer support is available as well. People talking about expense. in some cases, because you're not having to buy a lot of hardware or software up front for you to purchase or manage, and maybe you already have something in place today, but after time, this is going to need to be replaced, be it any kind of upgrades, be it incidental or even forklift upgrades can be costly, and it's the best time to start looking at it to save money is by moving into the cloud. Time to back up, the speed requirements that are there. As I mentioned, with the internet being a lot cheaper for larger amounts of bandwidth, plus most technologies in the cloud are implementing certain types of data reduction procedures, compression and deduplication, meaning that once you've got your data up there, the speed is a lot faster from the subsequent backups after that. Of course, meaning regulatory compliances. Could it be security? Could it be any other regulations, HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley? In most cases, using a cloud solution actually helps people meet those compliances with regards to encryption of data, in regards of getting data off-site, retention schedules of data. But on top of that, people using, looking at tools and people that have their SAS 70, or more importantly now called the SOC 2 Type 2, allows you to make sure that the company is adhering to specific policies and procedures to make sure that you are meeting those regulations. And then, of course, tools and reports to help you manage your backups to make it more efficient than what you're currently doing today. So, interesting slide here, talking about previous data loss. I thought it was interesting that that 44% of people have not had not experienced any kind of data loss, so they've never deleted a file by mistake or someone renamed a spreadsheet of something else. But as most of us know, these little problems could happen. Could it be human error, or could it be more catastrophic? It could be hardware failure. There could be viruses or any kind of threats. But I thought this slide was pretty interesting between the percentages of data loss. But here's some of the key features in talking about the top causes of data loss. And as you can see, 54% say it's hardware failure. And the idea is that realizing that no matter what, any hardware will eventually fail. That's 100%. But the idea with this is looking at something like using the cloud does give you the ability where there's no hardware failure. You're utilizing the cloud, using their resources, the redundancy, the availability to make sure of any kind of hardware failure, we've got you protected. Secondly, coming in half of that is human error, and this is the big one. This is the one where I mentioned you deleted a file, you renamed it something else, and typically it's a single file type of scenario. Well, using a tape and having to retrieve a tape, the time it takes to get that back, to pull the full, the incrementals or differentials, to find one single file, could take some time, and it might not even be cost effective. While using the cloud, you have the ability to, like I said, through the web or even through the client, to be able to search and find a file for immediate type of restore. The next two, software corruption and computer viruses, I kind of think are similar in a way. They're affecting the actual data and application of what they're doing with it. The one thing from a previous slide talking about different technologies is, the issue with replication is, if you're replicating a virus, if you're replicating corrupt information, well, you're replicating that corrupt information down to where you should have availability to it. So it's virus in, virus out. So the key to something like that is really the ability to version things. Which is again good with tape and good with just the disk, but again costly, time-consuming. Whereas cloud, it allows you the ability to version through different data. So as we move along in talking about the different types of data, the different types of technology, why people are or not, and the failures, moving into talking about disaster recovery plans. And this can be as detailed as, just simple as data, as high levels data, but as detailed as who's ordering the pizza when the site's down and needs to and all the employees need access to that. So what I thought was great is that, it looks to me like, more than half that were polled do have a DR plan. What exactly is it? Again, I don't know. But the scary part is that over 40% have no plan, which I thought was kind of interesting. So why not? Why are 42% don't have a plan? Well, number one, they're saying that they don't have a budget. Well, it's kind of concerning, and as people that are on the call understand, is that, what is the cost? Okay, so you don't have the budget to implement it, but what if you couldn't recover? What if you couldn't get back up online? Or what if it took a long period of time to get back online? What is the cost of that? And if you start calculating that in, I bet you the money will be found from the budgetary standpoint. 20% feel that they're not at risk. I thought that was kind of interesting. Really, I can't believe that anyone is that confident that something couldn't happen to them. Forget about the idea that maybe deleting a file isn't that important or renaming something isn't important, but and maybe if they lose hardware, that yeah, they'll get back online in a couple days. But what if they couldn't get back online ever? What if there was the fire, the human error, or the virus or corruptions or any kind of other catastrophic event that wiped it out completely? Well, what is the plan? So, data, 7% said the data is not worth the expense of backing it up. I guess their information isn't that important to them, just depending on what kind of industry they're in. And then the other 30% was some other reason. So moving past the disaster recovery plan is really, getting into the last piece of it is really, how confident do you feel that if a disaster does happen, again, a disaster could be very simple as a file all the way up to that natural disaster, but how comfortable do you feel that you could get your data back? The 30% say 100%, and I think that's great, but, my point is that I can't imagine anyone's 100%, but, unless they test it a daily, a weekly basis. But the key to this is really looking at it, what's acceptable. Is it looking at just the most critical data is available to be restored? But really looking at it, what is the cost and what's acceptable for the company in that regards. So a little bit about VaultLogix, to end the presentation here. Number one, we are an online backup company. This is all we do. We've been around since 2002. Kind of makes us the old dogs of the neighborhood in this business. But the key to this is really looking at it from, using someone backup as an insurance policy and using digital backup like we do. You want someone that's been around for a while, someone that's been making money. We do have multiple data centers located across the country as well as internationally in Canada for some of our international customers. We are the exclusive online backup provider for Ingram Micro. For those of you who don't know who Ingram Micro is, they're the largest distributor of hardware and software in the world. Just add some credibility from them choosing us to offer out to their customers. We do have, I think it's close to 9,000 business clients now worldwide. We have a great reseller program. We have about 600 plus resellers, and we are SOC 2 audited, which is a third-party audit that has come in and looked at our procedures, not just from the technology standpoint, but actually internally here and how we handle information, and has been audited by a third party to handle that. So to fold in a little bit about cloud backup and about our service, there's some key points here is that the VaultLogix solution isn't just a cloud storage, it's a cloud backup. It's a service that's offered. But the one thing that we do offer as part of the solution is the ability to do a local backup included into this. So you do have the ability to write to disk and that you can restore from, so that if you're not downloading from the internet and having to restore a lot of data, you can restore a lot faster. Some key features to the solution itself. There is a single client install for a complete network, so we don't have to install on every machine. We also can do SQL and Exchange and other applications without having to put an agent or a plugin on those machines. We do have client and web-based access to data. I know that was an issue or a concern with people, that control of data, but we give people that access, whether it be from the client that's sitting on their network, or if they don't have access to that, through the web as well. We do have flexible retention schedules to meet your needs. Could it be compliance, or could it be just for whatever reason you need to keep data for? And then again, there's no hardware to be purchased as well. So that concludes our presentation for today. This is version or part 1 of Online Backup 101. Please make sure you guys sign up for part 2. that's going to be backup policies best practices. I think this will be a good addition to what you guys might be currently doing today, and just from our information of what we've seen out there as well. So look forward to seeing everyone next month, and if you do have any questions or there's anything else coming on, please feel free to contact us. Number one, you can email us at sales@VaultLogix.com. We do have a telephone number, 978-777-7177, option 1 for sales. And of course, you can visit us at www.dataprotection.com. Great. Thanks, everybody.